Has now been Mr. DeGuerin and Mr. Henderson, Mr. Bailey at the council table, joined by Mr. Lewin and Mr. Milius at the lectern. Shall we continue now with this?
Right, I'm not quite sure. Mr. Durst needs something bad.
Okay.
You okay?
What are you doing?
We're back in court. Want me to help you?
Sure.
Okay, I'm gonna turn you around. Maybe. There we go. Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome. Okay, ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thanks.
Resuming where we left off, we have an hour and 9 minutes left.
Why that night she decided to climb out on the window. I mean, we were having a verbal argument, and then the verbal argument turned into a little bit of a pushing and shoving. And she climbed out the window, and I actually got out the window, I shut the window, I went to bed. And then my neighbor showed up at the door. The wife's over at my house, she says you're beating the shit out of her, and she's afraid to come home. And that's when I said to him, you know, she got this apartment on 86th Street, she wants to get some stuff together and go over there. She can come home, she can not come home, I don't care what she does, but I'm going to sleep.
Did you ever create any marks on her face, or did you create
No,
that?
I never saw any marks on her face, and I wouldn't give her a face.
Did you, if you were gonna have a physical altercation with her, what would typically happen? Would you-
Pushing and shoving and get out of here, or whatever it was, that would be the physical altercation. Falling down now and then, but I never hit her in the face, I never saw anything on her face, and neither did anybody else ever see anything on her face.
So your sense of this Jacoby Hospital visit is that if the guys at Jacoby Hospital wrote a report that said that she
I
had,
never saw any such report, the police didn't either, and the way I found out about Jacoby Hospital was not from Kathy, but after Kathy disappeared, then it was brought up either by Gilberti or the police, and they asked me the question you're asking. Saturday night, did she disappear Sunday? I have no idea. I said she was out all night Friday night, darn close. I had gotten up early Saturday, gone out for breakfast, come back to the house, woken her up like around 8:39. Hey, we're supposed to go to South Salem. We've got to leave by 10 to pick up Igor. She decides to get up. We get up to South Salem. And we do the things you first get to do when you get around the country house. You check it out, you look here and there and everywhere. And that afternoon, I went for a jog, a walk, whatever I did, and she just hung out in the house. I think she slept a big chunk of it Saturday afternoon, and woke up at, I don't know, 7 or 8, and then stayed up until, I don't know, 8, 9, 10, 11, whatever it was. I went to sleep.
Mhm.
I didn't hear about Gilberti's party until Sunday, and I immediately said, that's the last thing I came up here to do.
So on Sunday she went back to, she went to Gilbert's party, and she was there during the day,
And you go to afternoon, she left our house maybe 11, 12, she got there after, you know, around 1, something like that, and stayed until around 6, 7.
right. And you spoke to her before she left the party?
Yes, I called her to remind her that, you know, we got to get up and we got to get out of here, and I'm going to take the dog back to the kennel because he had this procedure done, but it still wasn't all fixed. They said, yeah, you want to take him for the weekend. If he's good, that's terrific, but you want to bring him back on Monday. And I had this closing with Douglas. He was buying a property on 43rd Street. I think he was supposed to be there at noon.
That was going to be on Monday.
Yes. And that happened on Monday. We went ahead and did that.
So the night that you disappeared, that Sunday night, or the last night that you saw her, I think, do you want to just take me through what you remember happening that night?
She gets back from Gilberti's, maybe 7 or whatever, angry at me, loaded, walks around the house, doing stuff, and announcing that she wants to go to the city. I said, you can go to the city if you want, but you can't drive, because I'm not going to go to the city. And
She couldn't drive because of her condition, or she was...
Didn't drive any kind, her condition didn't bother me at all. We only had one car, we just had the Mercedes up there. So I wasn't going to go back Sunday night. So the car and me and the dog were staying in South 7. You can't take the dog to the kennel Sunday night anyway, until Monday when I had to take the dog to the kennel and go into the city. So if she wants to go to the city, she can take the train. And she says, no, I'm taking the car. And I went and got the keys out of the car and told her that she's not taking the car because I'm not giving her the keys. And if I wasn't not giving her the keys because she was loaded, I mean, she'd driven back from Gilberti's house just as loaded, no problem, but this was her thing. She wants to go to the city, I'll take her to the train station. She wants to go to the city, she can call a cab, but she's not taking the car. That was an argument.
Was that argument just a verbal argument?
No, that was a pushing, shoving argument.
And then you went to the mayor's.
Yeah, that's what I told the police. I was hoping that would just make everything go away. I didn't go to the mayor's, I took her to the train station, went home and went to sleep.
And why would that have made everything go away?
Around at the mayor's, they wanted to hear, what did you do? So I told them I did that. I just never got through my mind. It was like a negotiation. You tell somebody something and, well, that's it. They don't go back there. They don't look for motive and why is he telling me this kind of thing. I thought that would get them to, leave me alone, accept the missing person like that. If I'm going to report her missing, it's their problem. Put her on the train, she came to the city, I don't know where she is, she's not going to medical school. There's got to be something wrong.
Now, it was going to become their problem to figure out what the
Yes,
truth
the
was.
police look for missing persons, what am I supposed to do? I don't know that I ever filled in all the little pieces of all that, but I just wanted to get it done with her, I'm going to report it, and that'll be that. I did not go through my mind that police ask oodles of questions and go here and there and everywhere. Just wasn't used to that. I was not used to somebody questioning my motive, questioning my veracity.
So after you went back home the night that she went missing on Sunday night, there was some discussion about that you spoke to her at some point, somebody called somebody, what was that?
Yes, that was the last part of my, the police are going to leave you alone now. I said, I called her, and I said, I stopped at a payphone on the way home, or I went out for a walk later, and I called her from the payphone. She answered the phone, and that puts her in the city, and they're going to leave me alone now. They'll just accept this and they'll go look for her. If she's really missing, if whatever, they'll look for her and I'll have done the right thing.
Did the process of, let's say you were sitting in the precinct, you're talking to Mike Struck, and you know that you're telling him something that's a lie. Was there a speed bump in there? Did you think to yourself,
I thought I was going to tell them this. They were going to see that Kathy got to the city. They were going to go look for Kathy. Kathy did get to the city. She didn't jump off the train.
but in the course of telling the story to the police, making a decision to tell them what the Germans call a Blitzlüge, which is like, convenient, quick lie. Do you remember a feeling of I'm definitely lying to the police. I'd like to get this over with and be back home, or how did
Yes,
what was
that
going
was
through your mind?
exactly it. I'm gonna tell the police I saw Bill and Luke Mayer. That'll put me back at the house. I'll tell them I went out for a walk and called her. That'll confirm that she was in the city, and that'll be the end of it. And she did go to the city.
Did you end up speaking to her that night?
No.
So there was a lot of discussion about this phone call.
Yeah.
Well, give me a few examples of the various versions of that story, because it sounds to me.
My story was I went out for a walk and went to there's a payphone on Lake Truesdale, not that far from our house, maybe a third of a mile. But I went out for a walk, took the dog, and said I called her from the payphone, and she answered the phone.
And there was another version of that, I think, that you, at some point, you told the state police, I guess. First you told Struck, I think. I mean, I have to say, this actually kind of comports with what you're saying, and it's answered a question for me I've had for a long time, which is that this is the number of versions of this are so many that the simplest solution is to understand that, you know, if you answered it quickly and then you answered it a different way, and a different way, and a different way, it actually makes more sense to me than you told one person one thing and another person another thing. I remember.
I think it was pretty consistent. I knew I couldn't say I called from the house because there'd be a record of a phone call.
Well, I think that you. My recollection is that you said to Struck that you got back home, that you called her at the apartment to make sure she got in okay, that she was watching the 11 o'clock news, or
Just what I said.
And then when the state police came to see you, they said, well, where did you call her from? And you said, oh, I called her from the house. And they said, oh, okay, we'll just check the phone records. And then you said, well, maybe I didn't call her from the house. Let me think
I
about
was
it.
speedier than that. I knew I couldn't call from the house. I couldn't have to go out on this rainy night and give her a call.
Right. And either way, you didn't make that call anyway.
No. I didn't go see Bill and Ruth for a drink that night.
My point is that as I go through some of these things, I'm trying to hit as many of the stories as possible, because, for example, it's kind of ridiculous that the historical record on this is Bob told the police that he called her from from the lake house. Bob told the police that he called her from a payphone across the lake. He also told the police he called her from Tatters. He also told the police he called her from some other bar that was open. I've heard all of those stories, and it's very helpful for me to say, clearly, those four things can't be true, and in fact,
And I didn't call her from nowhere. I went to the city Friday morning, went to the office, went to the police precinct that afternoon, made a fuss about the missing person, medical school, rich person, and then they started investigating and how's the marriage doing, and I started out with not so bad, and then spoke to Gilbert and Mary and found out, it's pretty terrible.
and when she gets back from Gilberta's, do you remember what the nature of the argument was at that point?
It wasn't an argument, it was just yelling.
What was she mad about?
The usual stuff, the marriage, what you're doing to me, blah, 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 blah. The lawyers, you bribed the lawyer.
When you went to Riverside Drive that evening, there was some Coca-Cola.
It looked messier.
But you weren't surprised that she wasn't there because...
She wasn't supposed to be there. She was, when Monday morning, she was supposed to start her 36-hour, whatever it is.
Did you ever hear the story about Kathy's clothes being in the trash?
Yes, but not in large. That came back to me from the police right away.
So that probably that was probably a time when Gilberta would have reported that.
Yeah, I really don't know, but that was definitely there. The school books and the clothes were all thrown out.
But you didn't throw out her stuff?
No.
So I think, just to characterize it for a moment, so if I've sat with people and said, well, what's your argument? You know, why do you, it's pretty extreme to say that somebody killed someone that they were very close to and had a loving relationship with, even when the marriage started to fall apart. So what's the logic behind that? So, so this would be the logic behind that. Bob forces his wife to have an abortion relatively early in the relationship. The relationship deteriorates so that there are multiple incidents of violence, various levels. There's the pushing and shoving. There's, you know, depending on whose a version of that you subscribe to. You throw a big cup of water in her face because she kept you waiting in the car.
It was soda.
Soda. You pull her out of a party, so you pull her by her hair, maybe a clump of her hair came out. There were incidents of physically removing her from these parties when she was being recalcitrant. There are wrestling and shoving bouts. The relationship had become physical in that way. A year before she disappears, you grab Peter Schwartz to get him out of your apartment, and he ends up with a broken orbital bone. She now goes to the police to support his story, so obviously it's frustrating and it's evidence of the relationship being in a very different place for her to go to the police with a guy that you had a fight with, or altercation with. The sexual relationship is on the skids. She's got her own apartment. She's got a boyfriend or two. 6 months before she disappears, you cancel her credit cards. You close the joint bank account. 3 months before...
When we signed this document.
Yeah, around that time. 3 months before she disappears, you and she had one of the many wrestling and shoving incidents that ends up with her climbing out of the window. She tells the neighbor she's afraid to come home. 2 months before your brother...
But she comes home anyway with all these figures and everything over there.
Yeah. And we put that in the movie, and people were, they said, well, that's not realistic. You know, it was interesting, though.
It was realistic. She climbed out the window. She could have gone out the door, but she climbed out the window. Yes. She's always afraid to go home, but she always goes home, and she's always leaving me, but she never leaves me, and she hates me, but she loves me. It was absolutely Kathy. She had created this astonishing thing. Now, well, there was lots of stuff there, but she had turned a good story into a very, 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 very good story.
So just to reiterate this position, you force your wife to have an abortion, the relationship deteriorates, now there are multiple incidents of violence, you throw a big cup of soda in her face because she keeps you waiting in the car, you pull her out of a party by her hair, maybe a clump comes out, various times you remove her from parties and events, wrestling and shoving bouts. A year before you have a fight with Peter Schwartz. He ends up in the hospital that night. Maybe he's going to sue you, you settle, and he ends up with some kind of a broken bone in his face. Their sexual relationship is not good. She's got her own apartment. She's got a boyfriend. 6 months before she disappears, you're going to separate financially. You cut off their credit cards.
That's what she wanted for a year and a half. She just never did it.
2 days before, she tells neighbors that she's afraid to go home if anything happens to her.
And that she goes home.
Yes, but she does say that, and this seemed to be something she said to numerous people.
If something happens to me, it's foul play.
Or if something happens to me, don't let Bob get away with it. Those two.
Oh, right. If something happens, it's foul play, and don't let Bob get away with it.
So I guess the position is, given the history that there was violence in the relationship, given the history that In fact, when you reported her missing, you lied to the police about what you had done that night, that later you lied to the Westchester County Police, along the same lines. And I guess the question is, do you understand why it's hard for people to believe that you didn't have a role in her demise?
I understand. And then they made up all that stuff about the neurosurgeon. I got Susan Berman to do it. I had somebody disguised. I had somebody cool, and on and on and on. And if I thought about doing something like that, I can't imagine doing it. The man knew Kathy and knew Kathy's voice. They'd spoken on the telephone rules upon time. The neurosurgeon ain't no idiot. He would have recognized Kathy's voice.
This is Cooperman, the dean of the medical school?
Yeah. And he volunteered that. It's not like the police went and questioned him. He volunteered it. I don't know. I think he must have been concerned about Kathy.
Did you think that it was reasonable for her to have called the dean of the medical school to say she wasn't going to be coming in?
Well, yes, he was the dean of the medical school. He was also a professor of neurosurgery. He was also Kathy's, not guardian. They all had kind of monitors, but somebody, counselor, somebody like that. And I don't think that job amounts to much. But between the two of them, it turned into a whole lot more. Yes, I think it's very reasonable, logical, that he is the one that she would call.
And after Kathy disappeared, do you remember finding?
Well, right away, when I saw the media was in the thing and they were calling, and I either told the media to call Susan, or I told Susan I got a call from this reporter and this reporter, and do you call them back? And you just can't.
You pointed out that you're not the biggest person in the world, you're not the strongest person in the world, and yet you do pretty well for yourself. In other words, Peter Schwartz and you are in a shoving match, and he's the one that ends up on the floor with his eye broken.
Yes, this is very true. Peter started a fight and he lost it. But we didn't have a fight. We didn't wrestle. We didn't touch with one another.
The night that
She disappeared.
the other day
We were on the train.
yeah. But you did tell me in our last conversation that you did have a physical altercation that night.
I don't think I had a physical altercation that night. You're sure I told you that? Because she came home, she was yelling and screaming. I don't remember pushing. I do remember going into the bedroom and locking the door and taking a pill. I don't remember any pushing and shoving, though.
So we know that you're comfortable lying when it's appropriate.
Yes.
So we know now in 2000 that something happened that piqued Janine Pirro's interest and got the Westchester District Attorney, Janine Pirro, interested in you again. Tell me about that.
There was new interest in me. It was Janine Pirro, and the first thing I heard, knew of it, was when there was an article in the Times and the, I don't know if it was the Times and the Post or the Times and the Daily News, and it came out on a Saturday. I was, the PR guy, he's still around, he's ancient, more than Matt's. He had been given a heads up by the reporters for the newspapers. And he had spoken to Douglas had spoken to Wendy had spoken to me, and they're bringing up the disappearance. And when it got to me from Wendy, it was that there were going to be newspaper articles. And we should meet with a lawyer. And why am I meeting with a lawyer about newspaper articles? I feel badly for you people, because it's going to be here in New York. It's a New York scene. but don't really gonna affect me very much in Trinidad.
And then did it turn out to affect you? How did it, when did
Oh, it blew me away. The divers and the lake and the lawyers told me. I really only had one lawyer, Joel Cohen, with stroke, and he was their criminal lawyer. He was a law criminal lawyer for me. And he said, these people have huge budgets. The fact that they're sending divers into the lake in the middle of the winter, they're taking a wall out of the house, that was in the newspaper article. I mean, they're going to do something. Janine Pirro's got to do something. I never heard the name Janine Pirro before. And I was told about Janine Pirro, has higher aspirations, wants to run for something big, statewide. She's not going to go into the newspaper and announce that she's doing all this stuff. She's going to have to do something.
And do you know what piqued her interest originally? What got her interested in the case?
Well, I think it was initially a detective up there who got interested in the paper, and I think that there was some, what was it? They arrested a flasher, and he said, oh, let me off, I know all about Durst. And this detective went and started looking into it, who's Durst, and got the file from the New York City police, who can't think of his name.
Timmy Martin.
Right, all right. So he started investigating and spending...
Oh, sorry, the police officer was Joe Becerra.
That's it, Joe Becerra.
But the flasher was Timmy Martin.
Why? Pleased to say I'd never heard about it. Anyway, so it got upstairs to Janine Pirro. They got this investigation into a rich family, and she must have decided right away, well, this looks interesting. I'm just going to get publicity with this. I can get media attention. And she right away jumped in and kicked him out. He was getting the attention, not her.
Yeah, he came out in that Vanity Fair article at some point. There was a big picture of him, and there was another article in the newspaper about him, and so he got himself into hot water over that. Then I guess Janine Pirro did a press conference in November of 2000, I think it was.
Yes, right after the newspaper articles came out, Janine Pirro jumped into the thing and took credit for the divers and the rest of it and like that.
And what were the divers for?
They were, like Truesdale. I mean, she never said, but obviously they're looking for body parts, looking for something to use as evidence.
So the position was that they were trying to reopen the case.
They will reopen, and we have evidence against this rich guy, Durst.
And what was your reaction to that when you heard about that?
Oh, the article blew me away. In addition to, I had a loft on Green Street, which I kept, and I also had a house up in Ridgefield, Connecticut. And I was told by Wendy this was happening, and I should come here to New York so I could meet with a lawyer. And I went to New York. I wasn't really sure I was going to meet with a lawyer. I mean, it's going to be a newspaper article. Why do I want to meet with a lawyer with a newspaper article? I came back to New York, and I went to my house up in Ridgefield. Saturday morning, I got up and went down to the Starbucks and got the New York Times and the whichever one it was, and it blew me away. Absolutely, totally blew me away. I wasn't the least bit concerned about the details. You searched the lake and put your blue in the face, and you took a wall out of the house, ridiculous. I was concerned when Joel Cohen said that she's going really far. DAs don't usually start making announcements in the newspaper when the police haven't even charged you with anything. And he said that she's going to go and do something. And then I met with him and do something. It was obviously she was going to have to charge me with something. She can't just investigate me and drop me. She'll have to charge me with something. And he was asking me endless questions about some stuff that happened 20 years ago, all the rumors back and forth, and this and that. Oh, and Susie Berman was dead around then. This was now, at the end of the year, and Susie Berman was dead. And this was, obviously I had killed Susie to keep her quiet. And the story just went right to where it ended up.
So, you hear about this investigation, you read the article, you're back in the New York area around
I
that.
freak.
And what does that mean?
People skip along, I can also say I went to bananas at the same thing. I was sure, based on what Joel Cohn was telling me, that they were going to charge me with something, and the whole idea of being charged with something, having people invested, not so much invested, but that people are going to find me guilty. I mean, I've been guilty for years in the newspapers, et cetera, et cetera. Now they're really going to find me guilty. And if they don't find me guilty, I'm going to be in jail, you know, on whatever, before the trial, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what I did was I decided I got to go into hiding. And I had an apartment in Dallas. I'd been to Galveston, Texas a bunch of times. It seemed like about as good a place to hide as there was in the world.
But you heard from her that she had been contacted by the police?
Yeah.
What did she say? If you remember?
He said, the Los Angeles police contacted me. They want to talk to me about Susie Berman. I think I and you are going to be best off if I just talk to them.
She said they want to talk to me about Susie Berman.
I'm sorry. Susie Berman said the police have contacted, Los Angeles police have contacted me. They want to talk to me about her Kathy Durst disappearance. And this was probably before the PR guy told me that the newspapers are doing these articles.
And then, so in November of 2000, did you send her this $25,000?
Yeah, I send her, when I've been sending her frequently, periodically, $25,000. And I sent her another one when the car blew up. I think right within a couple of weeks.
So basically you sent her 50 altogether.
Yes, I sent her two, like, $25,000 checks.
Right. Did you ever say to Susan that you were thinking about coming to visit her?
Oh, well, not that year.
And did you have any feeling about what she was doing in talking to the police? Did you feel like she was...
She said, Bobby, it's going to be best for both of us. That's what I just talked to them. All right, I'm going to say no.
Was there anything that Susan knew about you, your history, Kathy, no Kathy, whatever it was there anything that Susan knew as your sort of confidant that you would have been uncomfortable with her telling the police?
No, we had lots of private things, but none of it had anything to do with Kathy. I mean, when Kathy was, you know, going bananas, we could talk about Kathy all the time. But I couldn't imagine her talking to the police about that, just sitting here right now. But the police want to talk to me, I'm just going to talk to them. Is that all right? And like that was the conversation, whatever you want.
And then something happens to Susan then.
He was murdered.
Now, among other things, the police conclude, or say that they conclude that Susan would have known her killer because shot in the back of the head, and she would have been...
It wasn't broken in. The house wasn't broken in.
Right.
Nothing was taken.
So if you could...
Well, that's what I read. I read that they figured that Susan knew her murderer. Nothing was taken from the house. This person was obviously let in because she was already gung-ho for security. Gung-ho for security, but not good at it. The guy obviously was friendly enough to get up and, you know, in back of her. Yes, that.
So Susan is found dead on December 24th, 2000. Maybe she's been dead for a day or so, they think. And the police, a few days later, get an anonymous, a few days later, the police get an anonymous note delivered through the mail.
Yes,
Anonymous.
I was given a writing exemplar about the note.
Yeah, so I know you've seen, I know it's not a surprise to you, you've seen it before. It's
Yes,
the
they spelled
so-called,
Beverly Hills wrong.
Who spelled it wrong?
Well, somebody spelled it wrong, because there's an E in it.
So what do you think about this note? I mean, does this note mean anything to you in terms of?
I saw it during a writing exemplar at great length, but it don't mean, I mean, that's her address. Block letters, if somebody's hiding their signature, and they spelled Beverly wrong.
I think that,
I mean, the police went on and on about how cadavers are wrong, you know, most people will take that out of their body, or something like that. Like the writing exemplar thing, they would conclude that that meant that the person had something to do with medical or ambulance services, or somebody who was involved in that and would know and use the word cadaver for a body.
well, to begin with, you didn't write the cadaver note, is that what you're saying?
Right, the cadaver.
Can you think of a reason why somebody might write a note like that?
I can't imagine. Can't imagine.
I mean, there is one of the speculations is that whoever wrote the cadaver note was Jewish, because it's important in Jewish culture that you bury the dead quickly. And so now you have a dead person lying in...
That's an interesting theory. I never heard that. I don't know if I have no idea. I mean, yes, Jews are supposed to bury the person right away, but I mean, just thinking about it, here you go and murdered this woman, and now you're going to write about it? I mean, I don't see it.
Yeah, I guess the idea was that, they got the note on December 27th, that if she was killed, that her murderer maybe liked her, was a friend, was somebody that she knew, she was shot in the back of the head. In any event, that if it were a Jewish person, they wouldn't want her to be lying around, that they'd want the corpse to be buried very quickly, and that if it was somebody that liked her, they wouldn't want her lying around in their house. If she had the eyes, she
If
should
somebody liked her, why kill her? I mean, the whole idea, I mean, I always think of a murderer as more, I mean, first of all, somebody had a plan to do this, they had to go to her house, do what they did. I mean, if I was going to rob somebody or burglarize a house, I wouldn't, if they met at Susie's, and they wouldn't go to pick Susie, because there was nothing there of value. I mean, I assume her jewelry was there. I have no idea if she hid it, but that's the wrong house to burglarize. And now you're taking this big risk.
What's the risk?
What?
Which big risk?
You're writing a note to the police that only the killer could have written. So, I just think somebody would have to be, my rabbi, although I don't see him getting involved in any kind of killing, he might feel that it's that important that it be buried right away. But I think you've got to be pretty Jewish, religious, to feel that way.
So the letter was postmarked. Sorry, the letter was postmarked on December 23rd, and around that time, you were still living in Trinidad. You were living in
Yes, I
New York.
went to New York for Christmas. I think I went on the 23rd. I know I didn't go on the 24th. It would have been the 22nd or the 23rd.
And there's evidence that you had bought an airline ticket. Tell me about that.
Bought an airline ticket.
To go from
San Francisco to New York.
Now, the New York police, I think, made a big deal out of the idea that you had gone to California around the time that Susan Berman was murdered, but
I got there a long time before December 23rd, a long time before Christmas.
you got to.
I got to count it from, now I'm trying to remember where I was. I would have been, I would have been in New York. I flew to, the way to get to Trinidad, you fly to San Francisco from New York, from anywhere, and then you fly to Eureka, and then you drive the 10 miles to Trinidad. And I went from New York through just what I just described, and I'm guessing I was there for, oh, I don't know, a couple of weeks or something like that.
From Trinidad to New York.
No, right now I'm going from New York to Trinidad. I'm going to California. And I'm in Trinidad until the 22nd or the 23rd when I go back to New York.
What was the experience of this handwriting exemplar? Who made you do it, and what was it like?
The LA police, and I didn't have to do it. If you refuse to take it, then the judge can hold you in contempt and send you to jail. Well, that's not a huge threat when the guy is already in jail facing a murder charge. So I said, why am I going to do this? It can't help. And they said, but it can hurt if you don't do it. My lawyer said writing exemplars are like witch doctors. Nobody pays any attention to them. They still do them. Writing exemplars are witch doctors. But you should do it, because otherwise it'll be a big deal in the newspaper, and your potential jurors here in Galveston will see that you're refusing to do it. If you take it, it'll go nowhere, that'll be the end of it. And they made an agreement with the LA police that if he takes the writing exemplar, you're not going to talk about the writing exemplar until the Galveston trial and stuff are over. And then, shortly after I was acquitted, my lawyers, the Galveston police, got a letter that said he probably wrote it. Well, show it to me again. You got it there? This is the kind of writing that my lawyers and the police, both places, say that whoever did this acted like they knew what they gave block letters. Very hard to tie somebody to block letters like that. And whatever they say, we will get 18 writing exemplars to say you didn't say it, write it, but that would only be if you were charged in California to begin with. So take the writing exemplar. It'll be bad publicity if you don't do it. If you do it, it'll never affect you.
Does it make sense to you that there were people that suspected you of
Oh,
having...
sure. I mean, because she was my spokesman. All of a sudden, she's dead right after Janine Pirro's doing the investigation of me. I shut her up. I would describe Morris Black as being cantankerous in the extreme.
Give me an example of that.
Morris Black had opinions about anything, and he would express them to anybody, and he wanted you to get into a conversation with him, and if you didn't want to talk to him about whatever it was, he would argue with you.
So he had trouble making friends.
That's probably the biggest understatement I've heard in a long time. Morris Black made no friends with nobody, because he made everybody, he tried, he made everybody angry.
Was there ever a moment when he said, hey, for the last couple of weeks you've been writing me notes and wearing a wig, now you're not writing notes.
When we became friendlier as time went on, in the following months, he asked about how come you know, we're here, why did you rent the apartment as Dorothy Signer, and like that. And I told him I wanted to disappear and hide. I think I'm hiding. I don't find anybody recognizing me.
And did he judge in any way? Did he say, oh, that was a weird thing to do? Or-
No, it was just the opposite. He said, yeah, I did that a long time ago. Didn't say he changed his name or he dressed like a woman or anything. But yeah, when I said I just didn't want to be Robert Durst anymore, he said, yeah, I went through that. The nearest shooting range was halfway to Houston in something called, I don't know what, Pasadena. The nearest shooting range was in Pasadena, which was on the way to Houston, a good 20-minute drive from Galveston. And I would go there and shoot, and I mentioned that to him, either I was on my way, or we were talking, whatever it was. He said, oh, I like to shoot, but I don't like to go to the shooting range, because the shooting range is inconvenient. There are people on both sides shooting. Yes, you wear ear protection, but you can hear when they shoot, and it's, you're shooting from here to there, it's boring. I found this place right near where we are. I can't remember the name of the little island it was on, a little itty place. Or I guess in Galveston, everything was a little itty. Where you could go, and hardly anybody was there until there was a park there, but the park didn't open till like 10 or something like that. If you went early in the morning, there'd be nobody there. Perfect place for target shooting. There was a 10-foot high embankment, which is what they all want for target shooting, because the regular targets, for example, bows and arrows, and for shooting pistols, is something made out of hay, compressed hay like that, or foam. But you shoot at it a whole bunch of times, it gets raggedy, and bullets will start going through it. So this was a perfect place. We could put the target up on the embankment and shoot at it without worrying about anybody seeing. I mean, this is illegal. You're not allowed to go on public land and just shoot, except during hunting season or whatever it is. But anyway, it was just what he said. It was a perfect place to shoot. And I did that maybe 10 times.
At some point, you gave him the key to your apartment?
Yes. Just before we went shooting, a long time before we went shooting. And he did that, and then he got a letter from the landlord that said, get out. And they have open houses all the time in Galveston. It's something people do. Houses turn over very infrequently. And we had been going to open houses for a while. And he had sort of made it known, well, if you buy this house, there'll be plenty of room for me. And this is true, there would have been plenty of room for him, except that personality takes up all of everything, and I didn't want him living with me. And I had thought about buying a house there as a place to go sometime, but I wasn't going to live in Galveston full time if I was going to be Robert Durst.
And so at what point did you come back to the apartment and found him there? And tell me about that night.
Well, we had several incidences. The first one was we had gone shooting. I had come back. I had gone to the bathroom. He was in the living room. And he shot the pistol in the house. And he shot the pistol at the eviction letter that he had put off on the wall, taped or thumbtacked or whatever up on the wall. And I went out of the bath. First I was sure it was outside. And then I heard he did it again. And then I was sure it was inside. And I went out and he's got the gun in his hand. I said, put the gun down and get out of here.
And the next episode, I think?
He did that twice. I let him come back in a week or whatever it was later. I took the gun and put it someplace where it wouldn't be where we had been keeping it. And he came back in and he shot again, and I took the key away. And the first time he shot, I didn't take the key away from him. Mistake, I didn't take the key. I said, I don't want you here anymore. I didn't go through my mind, and you come in anyway. Second time he shot in the apartment, I took his key away from him. So he couldn't come in. And that was pretty much getting close to when I was leaving. And either right before that or right after that, I went and I took a room in the San Luis Hotel because there were some things I wanted to finish before I gave the apartment back to Klaus Dillman, I'd already told him I'm, leaving.
So you came back to the apartment and Morris was in the apartment?
Yes, that was the end of it. I had already moved to the San Luis Hotel. I had taken all my clothes and stuff out. I had a flight on Monday. I was going back to New York and do it. I'd already made plans. And he knew it. I wasn't keeping it a secret. I always thought the possibility I'm going to come back. I might buy a house. I might have a summer house here. But I'm leaving. He was in the apartment. I could hear the TV from outside. Opened up the door, ready to start. Oh, and also, since I had taken the key away, he must have made an extra key. And that worked through my mind right away. He's in the apartment. He made an extra key. Walk into the apartment. He's sitting at the table. There's a yellow thing on a sweater or whatever, jacket, on top of the table. And I'm, primed. Morris, get out of here, period. I'm leaving, get out. I don't ever want to see you again. He takes the gun out from under whatever the yellow thing is on the table. I grab him and the gun, and we fall down in the kitchen. The gun goes off and shoots him in the side of the face.
And how did you feel when that happened?
I was shocked, amazed, overwhelmed, astonished. My elbow hurt, scared.
And so suddenly that was it, he was dead.
Yes, he was dead.
And then, now you're in your apartment, Galveston,
Yeah,
Texas.
he's dead. And I sat down on the bed for hours trying to figure out what I'm going to do.
And then what went through your mind?
I can't go to the police. I can't go to the police. I can't go to the police. The police are going to want to investigate it and ask me a zillion questions. And from the outset, I'm going to say, well, my name's Robert Durst, and I rented this apartment disguised as a woman named Dorothy Snyder. And I could just picture myself going to the police precinct to report this. My name is Robert Durst. I rented this $300 a month apartment disguised as a woman named Dorothy Snyder. My neighbor is lying on the kitchen floor with a bullet wound in his face. He's dead. The bullet came from my gun. Oh, and this is an accident. Oh, and by the way, I'm a rich guy from New York, and my first wife disappeared, and I was never charged, but there was lots of speculation that I did it. And they're going to arrest me. What else could they possibly do?
So what did you decide to do to get rid of the body?
Well, I decided I'd wait till night and then I'd pick it up and carry it out of there. Then I realized I wasn't picking up that body and carrying it anywhere because it was much. I mean, I wasn't strong enough to do that. I could drag it out, but I just couldn't see. I mean, I thought about putting it in a sleeping bag or something and then dragging the whole thing out, but good God, that's ridiculous.
So you decided instead?
I decided to. It wasn't until the next day when I can't just drag it out. I'm going to have to dismember this body. When I went back and I realized I couldn't lift it, I couldn't drag it out, I was going to have to dismember it. And then I went to Chalmers Hardware Store, and now Morris had tools. He had saws and axes, a giant axe. I don't think he had a bow saw. Anyway, I went and bought a bow saw and then a bunch of garbage bags and stuff like that, and went back to the house, and I'm sure I got more stoned and more drunk, and I dismembered the corpse, primarily with the axe, but some with the bow saw and I think another saw that Morris Black had. Took the body parts and put everything else there that was bloody and whatever it was, that I ended up cleaning up the place with, put them in the garbage bags. And that night, I put the garbage bags in my SUV and drove to find some place to dump the garbage bags. It immediately so obvious me, I dump it in the water, it'll sink, nobody will ever see them, the garbage bags are heavy, and that's what I did.
So you basically just decided you were gonna.
I figured it was deep. Gonna drop it, it's gonna sink. Who cares where the tide is going? It's underwater, nobody's gonna see it.
But the bags didn't sink.
No,
What happened?
they floated.
Because of the air that was in the bags?
Well, I think only body parts float. Also, when I first, when people were first asking me, just because they're heavy doesn't mean they float. And I'm told the aircraft carriers don't float. I mean, this is all something I know, but I didn't think about that at all. Because it's heavy doesn't mean it's going to float. Trees are heavy, they don't float. They do float. No, it doesn't mean it's going to sink. Just because it's heavy doesn't mean it's going to sink.
Now, if you were trying to get rid of the body in a way that wasn't going to be traceable back to you, why wouldn't you make sure that the garbage bags were empty before you put the body parts in? Why would you have done something as careless as
I
leaving?
wasn't going to give the police the body parts. I mean, if they got the body parts, they'd know where he lived. I mean, the police weren't supposed to get the body parts. What difference did it make what was in the bag?
So the police do find their way back to the rooming house. They talk to Klaus Dillman, and
The police go into the trash cans in back of the house, and the stuff that went into that was supposed to go into the garbage bags that I threw in the water to sink, that I accidentally put in the wrong garbage bag and it went into the ash can in the back, like my pistols, a whole bunch of stuff which had my name on it, which didn't even get into the garbage bags that I threw in the water, went into the garbage bags in the back. And as soon as they couldn't go into the house without a search warrant or Klaus Dillman's permission, but they could go into the ash cans in the back.
so they found a bunch of stuff in
They
the ash.
found a bill to the eyeglass store. Yes, they found the guns.
Now, the eyeglass store turns out to be important because you went to the eyeglass store and they were holding glasses for you, and then you ended up going back there after you had dumped the body.
I had gone back to Galveston because there was nothing in the newspaper. I was in New Orleans, and I was following online with the Galveston paper, and they found these body parts, and they didn't know who it was, and they're investigating and like that. And I had never seen anything about who they suspected or anything like that. But that FBI guy who does all the chronicling, or there's a different word for it, he decided that whoever killed him was black, knew him real well, had a real big argument with him, whatever it was he said. But nowhere in any of that was there any implication that they had any idea who did it. Oh, and they figured out it was Morris Black from his hands, his fingers, his fingerprints, which they were able to trace. He'd been arrested a couple of times, stuff and wherever it was, and they figured out that it was Morris Black's body parts that they found. But there was nothing, zero, about who they suspected or about me, or I think they might have said that there was a woman living across the hall named Dorothy Steiner.
Just while we're on the subject, so I don't forget, Dorothy Steiner was not the only alias that you used, and I guess you used a lot of aliases over time.
Well, Dorothy Steiner, I signed the name Dorothy Steiner. I guess I didn't really use Dorothy Steiner for any other time. I can't remember identifying myself. Other than when I rented the apartment and signed the lease, I was Dorothy Steiner. But once I was, in Galveston, anything I did, I would put a phony name on it.
Well, I know that there were a whole bunch of them. There's Robert Jazowski.
Yeah, I saw that all over. I don't know who he is. When I was,
Says you
I
used
guess
his
I was
Social
first
Security number.
arrested in Galveston. I'd gone back to Galveston from New Orleans, and I had gone to a motel, and I had checked in, and I would just scribble it. And if they asked to see an ID, I would say, oh, it's out in the car. Can I bring my suitcases up? And I'll show it to you in a little bit. And they'd always say yes. Most of the time, they didn't even ask to see an ID, and I would scribble something or other. Now and then I had a problem with forgetting who I was supposed to be. And when I went back from New Orleans to Galveston, and I was subsequently arrested the next morning, when I was subsequently arrested the next morning, I had signed something that could be construed as James Turse, T-U-R-S-S, and it turned out that James Turse was the president of the law school in University of Texas, Austin, or something or other. He said he had no idea I was using his ID. He never heard of me before. And I never heard of him before. I just made up his name.
Well, I'm just going to read them to you, just because it might
It'll
spark.
be interesting. Go on.
Robert Jazowski,
Never heard of him.
James Fleischman.
Never heard of that.
That was a second Social Security number. And he used the Social Security number to get a New York driver's license.
I used it?
Yeah.
I used somebody else's license. Those who getting a New York driver's license, they actually give me the driver's license.
It expired in April 1998.
But that I got the driver's license.
Yeah. That you used Kathy Durst's Social Security number in 2000 to rent an apartment in California.
I remember renting an apartment in California.
Diane Wynn.
Diane Wynn.
You used that name to rent an apartment in New Orleans. Michael Ogden. James Cordis.
Yes, used Diane Wynn in California. And James Ogden immediately saw through the wig disguise.
Right. James Cordis, you had New Orleans utility bills sent to him. He was a photographer that you would use to take pictures of your properties. You also had a Walmart card under Cordis's name. James Klotsky, you had an Amex card under Klotsky's name.
No, James Plus, I went to high school, I didn't have an Amex card. I didn't get any of these IDs that you're coming up with, the licenses or the Amex card.
Dorothy Signer, actually, you did know or you dated, or she was a
I
classmate?
knew James Klotsky, but it ain't that easy. Try getting an Amex card, they want to see some kind of identification about you. They want you to have a little bit of money.
James Turse, Morris Black, I guess you used Morris Black's identification.
I had his license. When I went on to New Orleans, I had his license, and I was using his license to rent cars.
Neil Vignoni.
Emilio Vignoni, he was my handyman in New York, and we had gotten him a MasterCard or something like that, with my credit like that, so that he could, buy the hardware, supplies type stuff that handymen buy.
And then, I don't know whether these are all accurate, but Douglas Duncan, Robert Kitt, Lance Davis, Susan Burke, Robert Klein, Martin Ryan. That adds up to 20
87 or something. Anyway, some of them, the beginning ones, there must have been half a dozen that I did use.
Yeah.
But in terms of getting IDs in these names, Emilio Vignoni, we got a MasterCard for him. But for these other people, I didn't get the American Express card, I didn't get licenses or do any of those things. I go to Wegmans on the way to go driving to New Jersey. I don't know what gave me the idea that I should shoplift to see if I could get away with it or whatever it was, but I decided rather than to pay, I was just going to take it.
Just with the basic idea of how you were going to get off in Galveston, if you were.
How I was going to get acquitted, what my story was going to be, what my case was going to be. The best case was immediately, I mean, the other lawyers who came to see me, Mike Kennedy was a well-known New York criminal lawyer. He was sure I had to plead temporary insanity. My sister was still there for me. She was standing up for me. She brought in Mike Ramsey, who brought in Dick DeGuerin. Mike Ramsey was a real pain. He was sure I had to plead temporary insanity. They're never going to believe your story. You have to be insane. Only insane people dismember corpses anyway. But I came to meet the other lawyers. The lawyers were called, lots of lawyers, big case. Lots of lawyers wanted to take it. And Dick DeGuerin and Mike Ramsey knew what Mike Kennedy did not know, because Mike Kennedy's a New York lawyer, they were Texas lawyers, that self-defense is a very viable plea in the state of Texas. In the state of Texas, you find somebody in your house who's not supposed to be there. There's not much you cannot do to them. Most other states, what you're obligated to do is to call the police, do something else. You're obligated to leave. Texas, you're not obligated to leave. You can handle it more or less as you see fit. Obviously, you're not supposed to kill them. But you can, but there have been cases where people have seen guys in their garage, and this got a lot of publicity, and shot them from a distance with a rifle, and they put it in self-defense. And Dick and Mike both knew that self-defense was a very viable plea in the state of Texas, in the state of Alaska, and a couple of other states, but that was it. And I should go through it in detail, and it was explained to me that I was going to have to do the dismemberment. There was no way around it. But at the same time, the dismemberment happened, and both Mike and Dick came up with this independently, because they hadn't come to me as a team, they had come to me independently, that the dismemberment has nothing, should not have anything to do. The judge should separate the dismemberment from the death of Morris Black, because the dismemberment did not cause his death. And that was them listening to my story. The indictment says that he was dismembered, he was killed by being dismembered. And I did not kill him by dismembering him. I dismembered him after he was dead. And they were sure that if I was telling the truth, which they had to believe, because the alternative was to not represent me, that the judge should separate to a large extent the dismemberment from the death of Morris Black. Yes, the DA would be able to bring it up, and yes, you would have to talk about it, but the dismemberment did not cause the death. And therefore, they put in front of the jury about 1,000 times, was there anything that Robert Durst could do after finding Morris Black dead to prevent his death, or to change the manner in which he died? And they brought up about a zillion examples. Can you unstrike a match? No. Can you unring a bell? No. If somebody's dead, is there anything you can do to prevent him from dying? No. And that was the case. They said that would be the basis of our case, but you're going to have to testify. You're going to have to testify truthfully. You're going to have to do real good. And this will be very, very unpleasant. It's a very difficult case. But Mr. Durst, you're not definitely going to lose like they say in the newspaper.
And you told me when we were on the telephone that you thought that DeGuerin might not want me to talk to you because he wouldn't want to see you in an interview say that you had lied to the jury in Galveston.
Well, they didn't know what I was going to say. So, I mean, they've always felt that, you know, they got this home run now. Now, I get out there and I say something that implies that I made it all up, or that I told the lawyers and that we all got together and made it all up, or whatever. And that's a disaster. So they just wanted to stay away, and they said about a zillion times, you can't help yourself. Right now you're a free man, 100%. You say something inadvertently, and you'll find yourself charged in New York or charged in Los Angeles, and an interview is a big risk for you. Why do you want to do an interview?
At the time, you certainly said to me that you did lie to the jury in Galveston in some way, that your lawyer encouraged you to. And I think
He
that's...
didn't encourage me to. We went over the oath, and from day one, the oath says, you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Just make sure that the ones at the end tell the truth, nothing but the truth, that you do exactly that. In terms of the whole truth, if you want to leave out something that does not, which makes you look bad if you tell it, but does not turn into an untruth, well, try it. Try it. If there's something so terrible that you don't want to say it or you think could be construed the wrong way, then just leave it out.
Your Honor, that concludes that exhibit. This would be a good time to break if the court would like to.
Yes. We will break for the day, returning tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Two jurors I want to chat with about your schedules or requests that you've made. Juror number 12, you remain just a little bit, and alternate 3, please wait a little bit. But to all the jurors, do not converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this case. Do not form or express any opinion on the case. See you all tomorrow at 9 o'clock.